Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. I hope you're well today. Very happy to see you again. Scruffy mode. I hope you'll forgive that. I'm due for the hairdresser next week. So in this video, I would like to discuss this concept of wisdom. I'd hinted at it in my recent video on the concept of old soul, which is often attributed to the INFJ. And in the video on the old soul, I was trying to parse that notion a little bit, try to make a bit more sense of it, because it's a notion that as long as you don't try to analyze it, it's never quite clear what it means, and it can be subject to misinterpretations. And the same can be applied to the concept of wisdom, the wise. INFJs are very often called wise. Now, what does that mean? What is it supposed to mean? Does it mean anything? Can we make useful sense out of that? And can it be a source of drawing lessons for our concrete life experience? Well, this is what we're going to be looking at. Now, before I move on, let me remind you that I've written a book on the INFJ type, a book which I hope will at some point become the authoritative work of, philosophical investigation of the INFJ type. It's called the Ecstatic Soul. It's available for less than $10 in ebook and paperback format at the Amazon links in the description box to this video. So you click on the description box, you look at the links, and you'll usually have your country available, and you can just click the link. If you have any questions, if you're not finding your country, just drop me a line and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. It's really good. And it has a lovely cover, doesn't it? So I recommend you get it. Right. So, wisdom. It always strikes me that there's two areas where I see INFJs described as wise and standing out because of their wisdom, hypothesized wisdom. First area is online literature, wise beyond their years, things like that. You read online articles by the INFJ. Precisely the articles that, if you feel like you're getting diminishing returns from them at this point, you should move to the next level and get the Ecstatic Soul. These articles will describe the INFJ as an old soul and as wise beyond their years, and you can sense that there is a similarity, there is a familial resemblance there. Because if you're old soul, you've seen lots of things, you've been through various historical epochs, and therefore you're wise. But what does it mean to be wise? In an actionable sense, and especially in such a sense that it makes sense to say INFJs are wiser than other types on average, and that this is, their unique trait. I have to say that it's not quite clear to me what it means, because wisdom seems to me, when it's used in ordinary language, and especially when you say like wise beyond your years, usually what it means is just that you're mature. And of course, any type can be mature. Within the specific INFJ literature or literature about INFJs, the other source of that phrase being other types description of INFJs. INTPs might describe INFJs as wise, INTJs might do that, sensors might do that. I think there's a connection between the motivations for both sources. It is to sort of give INFJs a distinguishing feature. So, because it's a natural tendency that human beings have, that they want to distinguish types according to, a particular feature, what they think is a kind of essence. So what tends to happen is that INTJs will be described as visionaries, INTPs will be described as genius, super intelligent beings. INFPs will be described as born creatives, and INFJs will be described as wise people. But whereas I can get a sense of what it means to be creative, you literally can create a lot of stuff like books, novels, or anything else. I understand what it means to be intelligent in a logical, intellectual sense, get a high IQ score, and you do well in science subjects, stuff like that. I know what it means to be a visionary. We have visionaries in our society that we can look at and say, okay, yeah, maybe they're INTJ. I don't really know what it means to be wise, except in this rather vague and porous sense of just mature. So, how can we get to a slightly better understanding? First, the motivation for, that underlies the choice of calling INFJs wise, of giving that distinctive feature to the INFJ type. I think, basically, the drive is quite simple to parse. People look at the IN types, and the first thing that they think is IN types have a great quality that pertains to their mind. It has to come from the mind. That's what is associated with INs. In ordinary conversations about typology, understand, I'm not talking about specific, more detailed analytical systems, starting with Jung. I'm talking about when people think of IN types, they think that these people have great minds, and somehow they need to be distinguished in terms of what defines the quality of their minds. So logic for the INTP is the quality of the mind. Vision, in the sense of long-term planning for INTJs, is a quality of the mind. Creativity for INFPs is a quality of the mind. INFJs need to have something, they're IN types too, but what's left? INFPs already have creativity and imagination, INTPs already have logic and rationality, and INTJs already have vision and long-term planning. So INFJs get wisdom. Unfortunately, it's a little bit problematic, because it seems to me that unlike the other qualifications given for the other types, which are simplifications of course, but there seems to be some underlying logic to it, and again, it can more or less be measured. The INFJ's wisdom cannot really be measured, and we don't really know what it means, and furthermore, we don't really know if it makes sense to say that an INFJ is wiser than an ISFJ or an INFP, for example. So it's a little bit shaky, it's a little bit rickety. And one cannot sort of completely erase this idea that we INFJs got this flattering epithet by default, because the other epithets were already taken. Sure, INFJs are a little bit visionary, sure, INFJs are a little bit logical, sure, INFJs are a little bit creative, but they're not essential encapsulations of this. They're a little bit of everything, primarily they're wise. So, as you understand, for me, wisdom understood in this sense is not adequate. It's going to take some time to change the dominant discourse, partially because it's so diffuse and so widespread. But I think that we should start doing this. One has to start, and one has to have an impact. If you don't even try, you'll never change the image that you have in society. Of course, you could choose that you don't care, that you are happy with your self-image, and society can think whatever it wants to, and that's your choice. That's absolutely no problem. But I'm attending something that's maybe a little bit ambitious, but I want to try. And this is what I suggest to do. Either we try to get rid of this idea that the INFJ is defined by wisdom and replace it with something else, or we try to change the meaning of wisdom as it applies to INFJs to something that's a little bit more concrete, something a little bit more tangible, and most importantly, something that INFJs will recognize themselves in truly, as opposed to just very broadly, vaguely, and hypothetically. Now, I'm not sure at this point which of the two approaches is the better one, but let's play around with redefining wisdom as it applies to us so we can maybe keep that lovely word. First thing to remember is that wisdom originally meant something different than what we understand by it now. To Aristotle and to the Greeks in general, wisdom meant practical, philosophical ability for making the right choices. So that sounds kind of abstract. What I mean is that for Aristotle, for example, we were made of all different types of virtues, which we exemplify to the best of our ability. Say, might be a little bit courageous, might be a little bit, or cowardly, oscillating between the two. You can think of humility, you can think of kindness, you can think of altruism, and so on. Wisdom for the Greeks was supposed to be a virtue that was above the other virtues. Not in the sense of being a more powerful or important virtue, but in the sense that it was the virtue that governed how you related to your other virtue. And in some sense then, that told you to have the sense of when to manifest which virtue in which situation. So wisdom was somewhat akin to a rational understanding of your own virtues, of your own character traits, virtues, and the ability to develop them, and the ability to demonstrate the right one in the right situation. There are situations where you should show courage instead of humility, for example, or you should show restraint instead of magnanimity, things like that. So again, that's a more specific definition. I don't think that it necessarily applies to the INFJ, at least at this level and just like that. But this is to give you a sense that wisdom that doesn't necessarily mean originally what we think it means now, what we take for granted that it means now. It has lots of different possible meanings. And in the last few minutes to conclude this video, I will try to suggest what the particular INFJ wisdom consists of. In the simplest sense, I think that the better word to describe INFJs is not wisdom, but it's intuition. The unfortunate thing is, intuition is already a word that's used to describe lots of different, two different functions that we find in lots of different types. So it clearly isn't the case that intuition in that Jungian sense applies only to INFJs. But in a more common sense meaning of intuition, I think this is exactly what defines INFJs and what really distinguishes them from other types. INFJs are extremely intuitive. Now, to move on to what I mean exactly by intuition, wisdom as understood as a specific kind of intuition. It's the ability to come up with conclusions, or at least ideas, notions, that nobody else saw, and to do that before other people see it. Now, why is that the case? It's because of introverted intuition, but also introverted thinking plays a role in there. Now, look, introverted intuition is different from extroverted intuition. I think that I'll use an analogy to clarify the difference and how it relates to this idea that INFJs are the intuitive type by definition, par excellence. Imagine that you are, abstractly, it's a thought experiment. You're in a space, you're somewhere, and you see 10 objects in your immediate environment, and we'll call these objects A, B, C, D, etc. And these objects, looking at them, seem to be made as if A fits with B, they can interlock, C fits with D, maybe, F fits with H, and so on. You can perceive the particular ways in which different objects can interlock with another one. The any user, the any dominant particularly, or the any auxiliary, will usually be better at pinpointing, noticing immediately which interlockings work, how they go. And so they'll be faster at doing it, which is also why they tend to be faster when it comes to, say, like if you're playing an escape game. They'll just notice all the clues and connect them in the obvious way, because the clues are meant to be sufficiently obvious for them to be solved. So they'll be very, very good at that. Now, the NI user, the NI dominant, will tend to connect objects that don't seem to have an interlocking capacity in the first place, and then bring them together, and everyone is kind of surprised. And then you turn the object around, and it turns out that you can actually connect them in new ways. And so that's what NI does. It sees patterns that don't make sense to other people, and it sees the connection between those patterns until they become obvious to other people. And in some sense, once those patterns are obvious, the any dominants might again be the better ones at finding all the best ways of connecting them further and further. But the initial moments of noticing what can be brought together that did not seem to fit together, that's an NI quality, and it's obviously it enables great originality of thought, by the way. But it's primarily an intuitive ability that's had. And the INTJ will usually do that to at the service of indeed some plan, some vision that they will make fit with the order of the external world via TE. And in some sense, then these intuitions quickly become a part of the external world, which is why you see that, for example, there are so many business executives with great visions that are very successful. INFJs are a little bit different. They don't have a great deal of TE. The way they communicate those, intuitions are through talking to other people in an FE manner and parsing with TI. And the fact that they are parsing these intuitions with TI tends to make them even stranger, even more intuitive in some sense. The intuitive essence of NI is bolstered by TI when it is directly addressed by TI, whereas it tends to be cancelled by TE, not in a negative sense, just in the sense that it tends to be made concrete. And as soon as it becomes concrete, it's no longer intuitive. You understand what I mean? So the most intuitive type, I think, is the INFJ because of this, because of the hyper ability that Anna has to connect the disparate, what does not look like it can be connected, and to make it even stranger through the use of TI. Whether it's a good thing or not, I'm not making a claim here. I'm saying if there is a wisdom to the INFJ, it's a strange kind of wisdom, and it's the wisdom that I've described, and I call it intuition. Now, let me know what you think about my arguments in the comments. Consider giving me a like and subscribing, and I'll talk to you soon, guys. Bye-bye.